So I will be reading the comments on the chat box in case someone has to say something, and I'll respond to that. So first of all, I thank you for the opportunity given to me to speak to you all today, wonderful people, and share some of the insights that we as a foundation are doing some work in this area. So hi all, my name is Raj Shikhar, and I'm originally from Hyderabad, but I don't speak Telugu, and because I was born and brought up in Mumbai, and I frequently come to Chennai because we have a lot of great friends over there, and I do miss coming there because of COVID now. But I hope that I'll be back there soon for some work also. So my foundation is called Information Sharing and Analysis Center. It's a non-profit Section 8 company that focuses on cybersecurity. And pretty much this is basically, it was formed after the Mumbai attacks. The foundation was funded officially by the government to an extent and by the agencies. And one of the intent that we had at that point of time was, is it possible to identify the best hackers in the country, the best security professionals in the country, who can be profiled, who can be nurtured for cybersecurity, and then eventually they can be used for defending the cyberspace of this country. Now, that was the purpose of the foundation, and we still continue doing it today. We are partners with NCIPC under the PMO's office. Essentially, NCIPC, I'm sure all of you are already aware, it's National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center. It's a very long name, but NCIPC essentially is a very critical body in the government, which focuses on protecting the CII sectors in the whole of India. So we are fortunate enough to be a partner with them, where we discharge some of their mandates in capacity building. We are partners with CERT-In, and we work very closely with CERT on various issues. And we are also a public-private partner with Ministry of Education, and AICTE is one of our close partners in this. So as a foundation, what all we do, I'll just quickly brief. There are a few initiatives that the foundation has done, but the core objective of the foundation is to focus on a program called the National Security Database. In the coming slides, I'll touch upon why you all beautiful people need to be associated with this program and how this is going to benefit you and the country in some ways. We have a platform called Clean Exit and Cyber Range, which has been incubated as a startup in the foundation. Again, it's funded and is focused on solving problems in cybersecurity in a great extent. We conduct events called Defend the Flag, but I'll not bore you all with that. We have an interesting program called SIDS, which is called Smart Infrastructure Design and Security. Now, I would like to ask all of you a simple question. Since all of you are from the cybersecurity background, some of you are CISSP. If you're a CISSP, you will know what I'm talking about already. But nevertheless, the question that I want to ask you is that if you look at the whole world from the cyber perspective and also the terrorism perspective, I'm pretty much sure that you're aware that India is one of the most targeted countries in the world for terrorism, right? One of the most targeted. Can someone take a guess on what kind of, how many terror groups operate in India? Anybody? Can you take a wild guess? How many registered terrorist groups are there in India who operate from Indian soil?
I think people can use a chat window to type their responses, right? Yeah, okay.
You can just type on the chat box and let me know what your thoughts are. Like 5 groups, 10 groups, whatever that you hear on the news channel, 20 different groups. What's the number in your view? Can someone respond on the chat and let me know what you think? Take a guess.
Maybe around 100.
100. Fantastic. Anybody else?
More than 200.
More than 200? Okay.
Certainly more than in thousands at least.
Registered organizations? At least there are terrorists, so in thousands, but registered companies, registered organizations who operate like an outfit. Any more guesses?
150.
So there are 358 on give or take, which actually operate from Indian soils. They recruit cybersecurity professionals in the country by Facebook or LinkedIn. They approach
Can they be
them.
registered?
As in they have declared that they operate from the country. And,
the government would have declared them.
No, they don't need to have been declared by the government. They declare it themselves. Okay, we are here, we operate.
Yeah.
And
What exactly you mean by registered?
so what it means is that they have declared the intention to be malicious in terms of taking out activities that are detrimental to national security, and they have expressed the intent to support activities which are radical in nature, which will put the country in a position of harm. So when they officially register, they give them a name, they have a flag, they have an agenda which they declare, they have a website, and they start recruiting people for discharging their duties.
Does this include all the moist groups also?
Yes, it does. So
yeah, I agree to what you are telling, but my point is that most of them are underground. So many of them may be registered as a political party and doing terrorist organization on the slide, but many of them are underground in that.
So to give you a perspective, of that aspect, that everything is online. Yes, everything is online, correct? Now, if I have to do this job, let's say hypothetically to do recruitment, is it possible for me to go door to door and put posters around saying that I have an agenda like this? Can you join my organization? No, right? You have to go online. So you start promoting on Facebook. So discretion is there to an extent where you will not know where they're located, but the fact is that they're very much visible online. They have a website, they have a presence, they have team members who operate ruthlessly online, and they try to aggressively recruit people. So these people are very vocal about their things. They have a YouTube channel, they will promote their activities. So it's like a proper organization which is doing business, right? Now, when you look at the perspective of protecting, so I'm sure you all have seen the Family Man 2, Family Man on Amazon Prime. What pretty much that what they have shown over in the serial, a lot of it, in fact, a lot of it works on cyberspace in a very big way. How they do it now in real life, when they want to protect a certain environment or a building, let's say there is an Aadhaar building, okay, or there's a data center in Chennai for a large ISP. How do you ensure that they don't get targeted by a terrorist group? In what way? So again, nowadays what's happening is that most of these critical infrastructures are dependent on technology in such a big way that any disruption from these groups can cause immense damage. Now, smart infrastructures are basically heavily dependent on SCADA, PLC devices, IoT sensors. And these buildings, if they are not designed from a perspective of securing them from physical attacks, it's a big problem. So there is a whole science behind it. So there is, you'll be surprised for some of you to know this, that even the design of a building, the placement of a flower pot on the entrance, or even a bench in a park can actually determine the security of an environment. So this is a complete science based on crime prevention through environment design, or CEPTED. A lot of people would have heard of this, but this is a evolving science, and a very important one for the country, because there are 100+ smart cities which are there being designed in India right now, and a whole lot of them have vulnerabilities which can come out. So essentially, the government is looking at securing this by terms of training architects in cybersecurity and ensuring that they understand how terror attacks can be prevented. So that's not a competition for all of you, where even the architects are now learning cybersecurity. But this goes to tell you the importance of how the length and breadth of the subject is. That now there is no domain which has been left untouched by cybersecurity, and it's amazing to the way it influences every aspect of our life today, right? So that is one area that we have a separate vertical that deals with this counterterrorism and smart infrastructure security for counterterrorism, what we do as a foundation. Along with that, we have platforms like Cop Connect. We have comics that we produce in the foundation for children on cyber safety. And then, we have a program called Breachpoint that focuses on finding vulnerabilities among various companies proactively and report it to certain, so that they can be notified and they can be secured. Now, having said that, one of the reasons why I'm here today is to actually express our issues with respect to why we need to collaborate more and do more for the country, and what are the present problems. Now, it's great to know that India has climbed up the cybersecurity index. We have climbed up. Now we are in 10 points. We have climbed up almost. We are ranked among the top countries in the world who is focusing on cybersecurity. But it's also a fact that we are one of the worst ranked when it comes to cybersecurity practices, right? And the problem is so big that the amount of crimes which are happening against women and children, especially in schools, it's amazing. You'll be surprised to know this, but okay, when you were back in the school, how would you sit in the classroom? How would the sitting arrangement be determined? Can someone tell me? If you're in a school, in a classroom during your times, how would the arrangement of the benches or your seating arrangement, how was it determined?
It used to be basically based on the height of the student earlier days.
Yes, very true. And last benchers, those who didn't want to really study, they can go back and always sit in the corner. Correct? But
yeah, usually the bright students at the front and worst students at the back.
Yes, but today I'm talking about schools in Chennai. I'm talking about schools in Bangalore. I'm talking about schools in Mumbai and Noida. Your place in the classroom will be determined by the number of followers you have on Instagram today in the classroom. The school friends will not speak to you if you don't have X number of followers. They will not sit and eat dabba with you in the canteen if you don't have X number of followers, because their reputation will go down in the school campus. There are private clubs in the school run by the students where you can only enter those communities if you have X number of followers on social media. This is a hard fact that we're facing today. The seating arrangement in the classroom is also determined. Where you will sit will depend on how many followers you have gained or are having right now. It might sound like I'm talking about some US serial from Netflix, but it's not. I'm talking about Indian schools facing this problem. And what the young girls are doing to blend in is they have to have followers. Now, anybody will tell you that if you wear a nice dress, a traditional Indian dress, and you take a picture and you post on Instagram, are you going to get followers? Tell me. Are you going to get followers?
No.
Fast enough?
No, I don't think so.
You are right, because then the girls are forced to dress in a manner which may seem inappropriate, because that's the only way they have seen their friends do it. And they feel, okay, if I dress in this way without telling my parents, if I dress in a certain manner online in Instagram and I take these pictures, maybe I'll get 10 more followers quickly and I can start sitting with those bunch of girls with whom I admire most. And I can be cool again. I can be in the cool group again. And this is exactly what is driving them. And unfortunately, everybody knows that you can buy likes. You can buy followers. Yes or no? All of you are aware of that, right? You know that it...
Yeah.
Yeah, you know that you can buy...
All political parties do that.
Yeah, all political parties do that, but so do students. So if they want 1,000 followers, the other problem is that just imagine you have 2,000 followers on Instagram. You post a nice dress picture, you're in the dress and you post a picture and you don't even get 5 likes. That's an insult, right? So every week when those teenagers post pictures on Instagram, they need to buy that number of likes to correspond to the followers they have. Otherwise, it's an insult. So they need to fuel it by money. And if you are here, anybody, our parents over here, can someone tell me what's the kind of pocket money you give to your child every month? Anybody? What's the kind of pocket money you would give to a child? 20 rupees for having samosas once a month? How much? How much will you give?
I used to give only 200 rupees at the most.
Yes.
Just to cover the transportation, maybe 10, 20 bucks. That's it.
Yes. So if you want 500 followers, in that 200 rupees, can they buy? They cannot. So they need money. They need money every week. They need money every month. So what do the girls do? They go to the most simplest thing that they can do, and it is possible for them to do, is they go to OnlyFans, or they go to Patreon, or they go to OnlyCams, and they start doing webcam sex with strangers to get paid online so that they can fuel their capacity to have social media followers and be part of the cool culture in the school, back in the school. And this is not just in schools, it's spilling over to hostels in colleges. this culture is spilling over to all the rural parts of India in a very big way, and this is a big concern for us because the result is that most of these people, when they trade photographs online and they try to get money, they end up getting sextortion or blackmail for it, and that is the biggest problem. So I cannot tell you the extent of the problem, but let me put a perspective, give you a perspective. My foundation receives on an average 9,000 calls every month across India. Only for those who are aware of this, because the foundation is doing this job, we get on average 9,000 support requests from parents across India who say that my daughter's photo has been leaked online. She has sent it to somebody. There's a blackmail going on. Please help us out. The person is trying to blackmail and he's threatening to put the pictures online if we don't give more money. So this is the kind of problem that India is facing today. And you might have heard in news also, right? From politicians to large groups, they have WhatsApp groups where they share pictures of girls, and they have a whole lot of things going on around this entire crime ecosystem, and it's not that you can ignore it, because it's a big problem, and tomorrow it can be your family members, right? You cannot really ignore this. So the point is that because of COVID again, the children are online for far too much time than it's recommended by doctors, and they spend a lot of time online doing something, and parents have no clue what they're doing. So again, this is causing a lot of problems. But again, parents are absolutely clueless when it comes to technology. So for example, if I ask you a simple question on the chat, I'm just typing it. All the smart guys and girls in this room, I'm sure you know the answer already, but it's a very basic question. What's the full form of WTTP? Anybody? Children, they use it in their chats frequently. Can someone tell me the full form of WTTP? Okay, what about this? NIFOC? Anybody? Come on, all of you are from cybersecurity background. I expect more than this, right? Give me some answers. Don't Google it right now.
I am little illiterate on these lingos.
Seriously. So WTTP is want to trade pictures. Yes, Bharat Kumar, you are absolutely right. NIFOC is naked in front of the computer. And when you say POS is actually parent over shoulder, these are short codes that children use to speak on chat, so that it's in some way not very obvious of what they're trying to do. And more than 60% of the times when they use this slang, they end up sharing some pictures which are inappropriate in nature, and it leads to some sexual activity eventually. So if you have no clue about these things, then can you imagine the parents who are not from cybersecurity background, what is their condition? So here, it's a big problem where the children are too smart for the parents, and they have absolutely no clue what to do with it. Now, the problem is that when it comes to police, there's a severe limitation. Now, tell me honestly, all of you who are there in this workshop, how many of you have visited a police station for a cybercrime complaint in the last 1 year? How many of you have visited a cybercrime cell personally to file a complaint? Never? You have?
Never.
What's your experience? Have your problem been solved, Karthik?
Never.
No, it hasn't.
It hasn't been solved. How long
Yeah,
have
but
you? When did you go?
It was more of a card-related fraud which I had gone. That was also a cybercrime department which I had to go to in Chennai. So they were pretty agnostic to all this. They go with the normal term things like, sir, did you share your password? You shouldn't share your password. They talk to you as if you're illiterate. That's the way they are, right? As how a illiterate person would go. So they don't know to differentiate between who knows, who doesn't know. And they say, if you get your money back, let us know. Right? And that's how they do. It's a one-day exercise or half-a-day exercise. You go there and go from counter to counter and get it done.
Absolutely, yes. And one question
I have a very interesting anecdote to make. I lost my laptop and I went to the police station to make a complaint. And surprisingly, the policeman asked me what's the IMEI number of my laptop.
Not surprising.
And he said, believe it or not, he said, as soon as the criminal connects your laptop to the internet, we can catch him using this number.
Wow. I can share you some personal stories also. When I was heading Etisalat's cybersecurity team back in 2009, almost a decade back, it's a very stupid story, but let me share this with you. So there was an investigation on the 2G scam going on. You remember that, all of you? So how many of you remember the 2G scam?
Yeah,
you all remember it, right?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So as part of one of those activities, there were some cops who came down to just speak about investigating something, and there was also some incident for which they wanted to do some activity in office. So these guys come in and they look at the computers in the office. Okay, they pick all the monitors and they put it in the vehicle and they go. And I asked them, why are you taking the monitors? They said every data is inside the monitor, no? So we will investigate what's happening. I didn't have any comment on that, so I kept quiet and said, okay, let them enjoy what they're doing. They came back after some time and they said that we also want to take the servers out. And I said, are you sure you want to take the servers out? They said, yes, we would like to carry the server. And I took them to the data center and I showed them the HP Superdome servers, which was weighing more than 2 tons. And I said, okay, please pick it up and go if you want. And they said, is this a server or what? I said, what do you think? Are you kidding me or what?
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. I request Mr. Sandeep to stop his video. Mr. Sandeep,
what is that? Is the reason? What is the reason? Because is it like coming in the full screen?
Maybe it's distracting to somebody. I'm not sure.
Yeah. He's coming on screen. He's changing his dress. Actually, it is visible.
No problem. No problem.
But it was not you. I think 1 second. I think it's someone else. I guess. Give me a second, please.
Yeah, he has closed it. Mr. Sandeep has closed it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So these things happen, like the police, you can't expect them to be competent enough to understand all the times. Now, just imagine if they cannot solve basic cyber crimes, if they don't have, the ability to solve crimes on Facebook and social engineering or other aspects of Paytm frauds. Can you expect if a large company like a Tata or Reliance, if they have a cybercrime attack happening, do you expect the police to actually step up? And if the CISO visits a police station saying that there is a cyber attack which has happened and our SIM is detected and there are logs, our EDR has found something, do you expect the police to actually understand you? Honestly, what do you think?
No, the police are not very well informed about cyber security related things. There are 1 or 2 are posted and generally they are not available also. They are not very well versed with cyber security aspects.
Absolutely, yes. So my question to you now.
The normal police force may not be aware of all the technology and the terminologies that we use. But there are special agencies such as the RAW and enforcement wing and other branches. They are much more technically savvy.
Agreed. But at the end of the day, the field guys, cybersecurity professionals who work on the job daily in the industry, they're always a step ahead when it comes to the knowledge, correct? Because they are motivated, because if you don't learn cybersecurity properly, your job is on the line. But the same cannot be said for them, yes or no? If they're not aware of certain concepts, if they are not absolutely aware of some things, it is not going to cost their jobs. They're not going to get fired because of that. But you will get fired if you're not competent in your job role. You agree with me on that?
Agree.
So it's very crucial to understand this major difference. So I want to relay the point very clearly. Even if you know the chief minister in the state, there's cybercrime against your family, you go to the police station, you cannot expect that you will get timely help for that. So prevention is better than cure when it comes to cyber crimes. And a lot of cybersecurity professionals are competent enough to understand what is a phishing attack. They can, all of you are very smart. When malware is there, you will know how to deal with it. You can prevent attacks, and to a certain extent, you'll be smart enough not to make silly mistakes. But just imagine you are under the 0.01% population of the country which can do this. Okay, The rest of the whole population is absolutely clueless about what world you're seeing right now. So it's very important for you to understand that this problem is so big that not everybody can be as lucky as you to be in the industry of cybersecurity. So here, for those who get affected, they don't want to visit a cybercrime cell. It's highly stressful. Now, if you imagine a girl who's 16 years old and she goes to a police station to file a complaint, do you expect the person to talk to her decently? Do you expect that he will talk to her nicely in the police station and understand her problem? What is your assessment? You can type on the chat or answer. No, right? Why? Because they may say, maybe it's your own mistake. Maybe you had a boyfriend, you did it on purpose. Anything can happen, right? So they know this, this can happen to them. So they don't want to visit police stations. But again, it leads to underreporting to a large extent. So the point is that if you are a parent who is having a daughter who is about to get married, I'll give an example to you. A family called us up late night and said, sir, tomorrow there is a marriage for my daughter in the morning. We just got a message from the ex-boyfriend saying that, the kind of videos and clips that he has in his hands, he will make it viral in a way, and then it's going to impact the marriage. So, how do we, take care of that? So the whole intent is that, people who are impacted by this, they will not find a way to, go forward and do this. Again, someone is saying on the chat room, okay, yes, that's who I'm trying to set a context over here to help you understand, how big the problem is. That's what my purpose is today here.
It is Sripati here.
Yes,
I was just trying to say, because I just spoke to you earlier. So yeah, I think the context is very important for people to, understand like what is the message that you're trying to convey. Obviously, you mentioned to me that yes, the purpose of this meeting and the intention is to kind of how this group can support like the community to the community in terms of being a cybersecurity being in the cybersecurity industry. So yeah, I think you're right. I think the context is being set here. Yeah, I mean,
so I'll come to the point. I'll come to the point now.
That's the only thing.
True. So here, with these challenges, it's very important to know that if you ignore this problem and say that, okay, I'm aware in cybersecurity, I really don't need to, take care of this problem, then you are highly mistaken in some ways, because it will impact you indirectly one way or the another. To give you one more example, I way back in 2006, I went to an international school in Bangalore for giving a workshop in cybersecurity. Okay. I was supposed to go in the school at 9 a.m. in the morning, approximately, to give a lecture, but I landed a bit early. So I reached there 2 hours earlier in the school. So 7:30 in the morning, I was at the gate of the school. Nobody stopped me. So I walked inside the school campus. As I walked in the corridor, early morning, okay, I thought school would not have begun, but international schools, they start early. In one classroom, I saw a girl who was completely topless, she was around 11 years old, maybe 11, 12 years old, a very young girl. And she was surrounded by boys who were just sitting next to her and trying to touch her. And I got so infuriated by it. I walked inside the classroom. It was an empty classroom with just 4 or 5 people. And this girl was in the center of the classroom, topless. I shouted at her and said, what the hell are you doing? Do you even know what you're trying to do? Her response was, just shut up and get out. It's my body. Who the hell are you? I was absolutely taken aback by her absolute defiance and lack of fear of authority. And I was like, what the hell is this? Then I went to the principal's office and I said, what is happening in your school? And he's like, everybody here is a rich kid. The parents don't have time to visit the school. They have put the children in a hostel and they come here once in 2 months or 3 months to see the children. If I touch the children also and try to cane them or tell them a disciplined way of doing something, they will send BMWs and they will come by helicopters. I'll get called by the minister's contacts and say, how dare you touch my child, and complain on them. So we have to ignore this. We have no option but to do this. Now, tell me something. if your child, if you're not that kind of person, but you send your child to a school like this, and if your child happened to be one of the students in that classroom, do you think it will impact your child or not? What do you think? You're very careful, but if one person is like that in the classroom, is it going to impact your child? What do you think? It will impact, right? So why I shared this example to you is because I want you to understand the reality of today's India, the modern India today that you're talking about. There is a picture that a lot of you don't know when you go to the ground. And it's very important for you to know that, if you think that, this will not impact you or your family, what goes around comes around. So I definitely feel that, if you don't act on it, it will definitely impact everybody in life. So we should do something about it. So now coming to the main point here. So what happens is that when a victim is impacted by cybercrime, how do you help them out? First and foremost, it's very important to know this, that if you're not trained, if you're not smart enough to understand how to identify the problem in a child or a person who is going through a hard problem, then you will not be in a position to support them. Yes. So first responder is a category given to a cybersecurity professional or a parent or a teacher who is trained on how to visually see the cues of what a child is going through. To give you one example, do you know that there are doodles in back of every page of children? Are you aware of that? You would have done as a child, right? As children, you would have doodled on the pages. Yes or no? Have you done doodling anytime in your life? Yes. So you also agree with me on this, that a sad doodle, sad smileys on the book also indicate something is wrong in the child's life. Do you agree with that? And that you should investigate why the child is drawing such kind of drawings. Correct? So this is one example I'm trying to tell you. Observation. So, marks on the hand, the weight gain over time, dark circles on the eyes, social interactions, stopping going to basketball, not playing, certain games, staying back home too often, change in language. There are so many signs that a parent should understand about young teenagers from the age of 8 years to 18 years, that if they miss those signs, there is a deep problem in the child or the teenager, and they are going through a very rough phase in life, and if they are not able to intervene on time, there can be a potential disaster happening, right? So this is what it's very important. The first responders are people who do this. Now, once you spot a problem, the second role that is required is of a cyber psychologist, someone who will counsel the victim and tell them, don't worry about this problem. This is not the end of the world. Don't commit suicide. Don't try to cut your hands. Don't try to jump off in front of a train. This is not required. Why you must live and do things. Technical advisors. These are people from the background in information security. Someone who has done ethical hacking course, someone who has done, certifications in cybersecurity. These are the guys who will, or girls who will help the victim in securing their mobile devices, securing their laptops, securing their accounts, Gmail accounts and Facebook accounts, enable better settings so that they are not victimized by somebody else remotely and blackmailed. Teach them how to make strong passwords and all those things. Okay. And lastly, the legal advisor, someone who will tell under what section you need to file a complaint in police station, how to file an FIR, what sections you must put inside so that there is an actionable thing which happens by the police, and how they can get justice, including recovering money you have lost online in under 24 hours time. It's possible, but you need a legal expert to tell you that how to do that efficiently. So it's an ecosystem of these 4 pillars that's required to help every cybercrime victim, which is not possible today by just visiting a police station. So what I'm here asking all of you today is that since you are from the background of cybersecurity, you can at least, those who have done law, they can be part of the legal advisor category. Those who have done, those are from the healthcare backgrounds. Someone who has done, who is a certified medical professional can be under the cyber psychologist category. Those who are from this hacking background or security background can be part of technical advisors. If you're none of them, but you are a parent or a teacher and have children, you can at least be trained to become a first responder. Okay. Now, once you are certified or you are recognized as a first responder, you become part of a program called the National Security Database. Now, what is this program? Now, this is a program which identifies the best experts in the country. And when I say best experts, I actually mean it. To give a perspective, if you are a exploit researcher, okay, there is an exam for 8 hours in the NSD where you have to code an exploit, show your capabilities, demonstrate your skills, and the multiple challenges for 8 hours at least. And once you successfully complete and you score 80% in the exams, then there is a psychometric testing which happens by a psychologist on your profile. And based on the psychometric assessment test report, there is a security clearance given to you, and then you become part of the NSD project. So it's a very difficult process to get inside this. Okay. And it's a program which has multiple levels. This was launched in 2011 by the Government of India, and it's a stringent program, and it's recognized by the Government of India. It's an official program supported, and we can see that there are some beautiful artists in our session who are trying to doodle on the screen. Fantastic. But so these are some various ranks in NSD. One is that you have intervention officers, cadet, falcon, guardians, lancers, and scholars. I'm asking all of you to help us increase your participation in the first level of NSD, is called the intervention officer program, where we need a lot of people today to handle this. Okay. Now, if you're somebody who has done CEH or similar exams, or you are a VAPT expert or threat hunting expert, or you are a malware analyst, then you can become a cadet by passing a theory exam, and you can become a falcon, the most respected designation in the NSD program, by passing a lab exam in one of those categories mentioned. After you complete 5 years of work experience, you can apply to become a guardian in the sector if you've worked on a bank or a power sector or an aviation sector for more than 5 years. Okay. And then if you work for intelligence, when I say intelligence, I mean hardcore intelligence for the country, then you will be awarded the Lancer category, where you have contributed for defending the Indian cyberspace from potential cyber attacks, or have investigated something very big which helped the country in a very big way. You're awarded the Lancer category. Finally, the scholar category, where with 7+ more years of experience, if you're a CISO, if you are a CIO, a CXO, senior manager responsible for handling business in cybersecurity, then you will apply to become part of the scholar program. And at each level, there are various security clearance levels that you get, which will enable you to engage with the country in different ways and help the country in solving the most pressing problems in cybersecurity. And once you become trained in a certain skill, especially like the intervention thing, then you get an ID card like this. So this is an ID card given to every candidate who clears the intervention level program under NSD. So you become a certified cybercrime first responder. And this ID card, you walk into a police station and you tell them that I'm an intervention officer. Then in certain states, you are recognized to interact with cybercrime victims directly and offer them counseling for intervention. Okay. And it's an international program. It's recognized worldwide, this particular program. And this is a volunteer program. First of all, it's for volunteering. So this means that, you are qualified technically to help victims and guide them in the right direction. So the victim knows that, you are somebody that, this is something that, they can trust upon and do this. So this is a program that is recognized under the Ministry of Education NEET 2.0. And it's a very open program promoted by the Ministry of Education to have intervention, because most people today in India are falling victims of cyber crimes, and we don't have enough manpower today to solve these problems. So once you want to become an intervention officer, you are trained on the following things. What is gaming addiction? In what ways, so for those who are worried about the ID card here, this ID card is a sample ID card. This girl does not exist. For your information, we are from security background, so we understand what you're doing. This is only for your reference. So please don't worry about it that someone will misuse this card. This number, ID, everything is only for representation. Of course, in real world, your ID card will look exactly like this, but very different information is here. So in the program, what you're trained is essentially you're taught on how to identify the kinds of drugs people use, How do they use darknet to procure bitcoins? In what ways are they actually using it for, for addiction? What are gaming risks and what is gaming addiction? What is tech abuse? What are extortion crimes and how they actually play out? Then you learn about cybercrime and regulatory aspects, so that tomorrow if someone is bothering you with some kind of harassment online on Facebook or WhatsApp, you'll be trained on how do you take action on that legally. Okay. Then you go through cyber laws and case studies so that you can help others. And finally, if you have children, family members in your house, how can you entertain joyful parenting for your children? By making sure that you are not becoming a spy on them, at the same time you assist them. So that's the program. So there's a concept called paying your cyber tax. What we say is that all of you have been privileged enough to be part of cybersecurity industry and are now working in the country to advance your careers. And you all are lucky that you're part of this industry, right? So what we urge all of you, and we have a request to all of you today present over here, our humble request is that try to see if you can start doing something like paying your cyber tax. It's a concept where you don't pay money, but you pay 1 or 2 hours of your time in your life to spread awareness in schools, talk to victims who are having some problems, guide somebody on the phone, and do basic volunteering work, which will enable families to not panic, or it'll cost children not to commit suicide, and find a way in which they can get their problem resolved faster than what they will get normal help in the police stations. So you can work with the cops under our interface we have called Cop Connect, and you'll be part of the NSD program, which means that you'll be declared as a national asset for the country, who is working as a volunteer to support the country's fight against cybercrime. And as a human being, if you step it up, what we can give in return is that there's a large network of CCIOs or intervention officers across India in every state, thousands of them. We can only promise you that tomorrow, if you ever face a problem, the whole community is there with you to help you out. Even if you're not part of this also, the community is still there as a part of you to help you out. So this is what my intent is to to do this. Of course, I cannot be speaking too much about cybersecurity because you all are already from the same domain. So am I. But I thought that these are few things that if you understand the problems that India is facing, and if you can spare an hour as a volunteer, we'll be greatly indebted to your contribution. And that's about it from my side. You can visit our foundation called Isaac India to learn more about this and become part of the NSD program, and start helping us out. So with this, I request if there are any queries, I'll be happy to answer them.
This is Vidya. Is there any age criteria for people to attend this?
18 years and above. Under 18 years, it is not allowed to attend the program because there are many sensitive topics that we'll be talking about and speaking about, especially with respect to extortion crimes and drug abuse. So children under 18 years are not allowed to attend the program. Above 18 years, you can attend the program and become part of this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What is the process for registering and becoming a part of this?
So one is that you will have to complete a formal training, which is again, by the Ministry of Education program. It's called the Intervention Officer Program, CCIO. It's a 6-day program done over the weekends on Fridays and Saturdays for 2 hours, where you'll be taught on the intervention aspects and you'll be trained on how to deal with victims online. Once you complete the training, there's an examination held online. Once you pass the exam, then you will get the ID card and the certificate, which will make you registered in part of the database program. And then you can start helping people after that.
Is this training completely virtual?
It's completely virtual. It can be taken completely from your home. It's instructor-led program, which means that live instructors will come and teach you this, and you will get the recordings of the video for 2 months access online, which will enable you to undergo the training program online if you miss classes and take the exam whenever you're comfortable.
Can you please share the details of that?
Yes, I can. I can.
So there may be many interested in our groups because they are all cyber security people.
I'll be delighted if there is an interest. Definitely we need, because volunteering is always a great job, and more the merrier always. So I have just posted a small link over on the chat box for everyone's benefit, and you can register for the program online, and this is done every month, and this is part of the Ministry of Education's initiative, and if you become certified in this after the exam, you pass the exam, then you become part of the database where you start helping people online.
Yep. Thanks, Raj. I think it was informative, and it was
the whole program. Is it free or is it?
No, it's not. It is not free. There is a training exam and fee for it. It's 5,000 plus taxes. That is again decided by the NEET government program. It's again a very nominal fee. It's an investment that you do, and again, the fees that you pay, 25% of it is again spent by the government officially on sponsoring education of underprivileged children. So this will go as a donation from your side to the foundation, for which you'll be given a training for this. And then once you pass the exam, your profile will be sent to all the police stations wherever you're living. For example, if you're in Chennai, your information will be sent to the Chennai Cybercrime Cells and Police Station, and it will go to the commissioner and everybody else that with a file which will have your name, address, telephone number, and email ID, and the time you're available. Once a month or once a quarter, how much hours can you give, and what's your preferred time of being contacted. This will be made available to the police stations so that when there's a victim and they need someone to be contacted, then they can pick a call and they can request you to assist those people online, or they can escort you. They can send a vehicle to pick you up so that you can go to the police station officially as part of the police team, and you can spend 1 hour in their cabin to talk to some parents who are very stressed about something, so that the officials who are not able to handle the problem, they can take your advice and expertise to solve a problem which they are not able to solve on their own because of their lack of training or lack of knowledge in forensics or whatever it is. So it all depends on your availability time. It's an optional thing. If you don't want to share your information, it's a privacy thing, then it is not shared. I know, and you can just say that I don't want to help people, I just want to learn for myself. It's your choice, but we prefer if you can actually nominate yourself as a volunteer and register also, so that at least in a year, even 1 hour you can take a online Zoom class for students in 9th and 10th standard. Even that's a big support, because you telling them about the problems in cybercrime, we will teach you all those things, how to do that. But once you do this, you are actually saving 100, 200 children from falling into traps online, right? So that number of cases are reduced. That means that number of less stress on the police station, overall crime in the state is reduced. So that's a great benefit to the country in many ways, because the police can be utilized in other activities and not waste their time in small problems, right? So every hour that you contribute, it counts a lot.
So I have a question here.
Yes.
Is there any way your organization will also be spreading on the awareness to the parents or to the children, in the colleges and schools and all?
So the foundation does it, and if you need us to assist you in these kind of activities, we are there. We do this very frequently. We have hundreds and thousands of CCIOs who do this for free. So if you need this to be done in your society, for example, if your society has 200 flats and you're organizing an online virtual meet for all your society members to educate them on cyber safety issues, an expert can be made available, someone like you who will spend an hour in covering very key important aspects that can help the entire RWA members for that. Or a school children, they can be given the invitation and we can do a session online for them. So all those can be possible, and if you do have something like that, feel free to reach us. We'll be able to arrange something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Regarding this registration, you told that all members will be registered as an intervention officer, etc.
Yes.
So this database is maintained by whom? By you or somebody else?
This database is part of the NSG project, which is part of the foundation that we maintain along for the Government of India. And this database is available for all the government agencies for free, where they access this database and they try to utilize it. So if you are a person who is an intervention officer, then you will be restricted to civilian cases. But if you're a cybersecurity expert who has a specialty in certain domains, for example, you are very good in malware reverse engineering, for example, then you can become empaneled in the Falcon level, and then your information is shared with agencies like IB, RNAW, or NTRO, or other 10 plus, the defense agencies in India. They will be giving your details so that they can contact you for sensitive projects. they can engage you with it like that. It depends on what kind of level you are at in the program.
Yeah, Raj,
privacy and other things are taken care by your organization as well as the police department with which you share. That is my question one. By the way, I am not very clear about your organization. Is it a government organization or it is an independent private organization?
It is a public-private partner with the Government of India. It's an independent Section 8 non-profit foundation that is a PPP with the Government of India. It's a public-private partnership.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like you can say it's a semi-government, but it's not exactly government. It's an independent foundation, but it works very closely with all the.
Semi-government means it gives a certain level of confidence to the members. And
that's why it's a PPP.
Sharing our details with a private company is always quite risky. So if it's a government, semi-government, it is much more reliable, and we feel more confident in.
It is, and it is. I can assure you that. And if you would understand this, CERT under MeitY or NCIPC, which is under the Prime Minister's office, will never sign a public-private partnership with a private company. It's not possible as a government body, and they'll only do it with the most reliable foundations in the world. And we are the only foundation in the country who has this, who are doing this work, and we're dedicated to this cause. We don't have any other activity in the foundation except cybersecurity. So it's a pretty much, we have a strong credentials, and you're free to, write letters to the PMO if you wish to verify the authenticity of it. We are more than happy to do that for you. So, but you can be rest assured that, you are in absolutely safe hands, and, your time that you're going to spend, it will be absolutely worthwhile for the benefit of this country only.
Yeah, thanks for the details, because even I am hearing your company, honestly, I am hearing this name of your company for the first time, and by coincidence, it almost sounds like Isaka only. Isaac. So
yes.
Probably when you are presenting, maybe next time you can add one slide about the background of your organization and what you do and how you operate actually. What is your structure? I mean, administrative and other structure.
Happy to share that.
Help us to understand you better.
Definitely, yes.
We're all hearing. Maybe I don't know. I am hearing you at least for the first time. Your company name.
With a billion people in this world, there's always the first time.
Yeah. Okay.
Do we have any more questions?
So I just looked at the portal, and it's asking for an ID number. So is it safe to give our ID number on the portal, the Zoho survey portal, I think?
Yeah, it is safe. The reason is because, you have to give any one government ID proof. You can give either your PAN card or Aadhaar card or your passport number or driving license number. This is because, once you give your ID proof, it is verified in the backend. And then, the point is that, we will be interfacing you with the police stations across India. So that also means that, we are required to do a background, verification, and also we are required to maintain this data so that, genuine people are participating in this program. So it's absolutely safe to give. And you also will have to provide your home address if you wish the hard copy of the certificate and ID card. Then the foundation will courier you the ID card and the hard copy of the certificate at your home address. If you're comfortable with that, you can do that also later.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I mean, just to add on top of that question, the concern here is it appears that there is an interface with something called Zoho app. And it kind of, jumps from isacindia.org to Zoho app, which is a commercial website.
So Zoho is an Indian company, and we are very proud that we are partners with Zoho, and Zoho has been very kind to our foundation in terms of supporting our IT infrastructure and management as a foundation. So Zoho is an absolutely beautiful organization that is 100% made in India company, and our entire IT infrastructure runs on the Zoho network. So the surveys that we conduct, the forms, the sessions that we do, a whole lot of it we use Zoho, and we are proud to use an Indian company for this service. So we prefer this over a G Suite or a Microsoft product. So that is the reason why it's going to Zoho.
Just a quick
Thank you.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
How do you get the revenue? From where you get the revenue? How is this foundation gets the top line? Just a question. Yeah,
I'll be happy to answer that. So one of the things that we do is that I'll just share the slide and show you brief on this so that you understand what we do. You can see this the slide.
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
Okay. So first and foremost, the foundation is a self-sustaining foundation, and whatever activities we do, we are absolutely sustained by our own activities in a way in which it is, we are able to generate revenue, sustain, and pay the people who are working in the foundation. Now, to give an example, Defend the Flag, which you see on the right-hand side, it's an event which is done in collaboration with NCIPC and CERT every month. It's an online program. And the Tata group, Tata Communications, it's based in Chennai. Tata Communications Limited, they fund very generously to this program to create awareness among the CISOs across the country. They give it as a grant, and they sponsor it out every year. All the Taj hotel properties across India, ISAC has premium access to it because of the Tata Group's generosity, for which we are able to conduct our events at a discounted price. So that saves us a lot of money as a foundation. Similarly, we CyberRange Labs, which you see, it's basically simulation labs that are deployed at various colleges and universities to train people in cybersecurity. So we deploy CyberRanges from the foundation in collaboration with the industry. So the recent partnership has been with TCS, who has funded $500 million to the foundation to set up labs in Coimbatore, and we do these kind of projects internationally also. So the foundation basically pretty much is taken care by the best of the industry partners who understand the problem and the gravity of this issue, and they support the measures in which we are trying to work with the government in doing this. So it's again a Section 8 company, which means that all the funding that we get is public in nature. It's auditable publicly. It's available from any chartered accountant can pull it up and see the records. And Section 8 is the strictest form of non-profit, which means that even a penny here and there, the government associations, because they're involved, there's a strong advisory and monitoring which happens in the foundation. Any small mistake can lead to heavy penalties to the foundation and even lead to arrest. That is the compliance that the Section 8 companies have to follow. So we are not a trust. We are not a non-government organization as in a society. We are not those kind of trusts. We're a Section 8 company. So it's the strictest form of compliance required to maintain that. And Clean Exit is another program. This is basically the rating of the behavior of the people who work in cybersecurity, especially in the companies. There are more than 300 companies who participate with the foundation in rating people so that they can be secured from the behavior. Again, NSG program itself has exam fees that we collect for the program. So it's pretty much we are able to survive and sustain. And it's been more than 10 years now that the foundation is existing and running along with its initiatives across India. So pretty much that's how we sustain ourselves.
Is this ISAC Foundation Indian foundation altogether, or is it a collaboration?
It's 100% made in India for Indian cyberspace. There are no. It's an Indian foundation. It's based out of Mumbai, and it's a Section 8 company, which is again it's again a foundation where everything is. Again, you have people from the defense and the intelligence who are part of the advisory committee to handle this.
Because I see one called h-isac.org, which is, I think, healthcare-isac.org. So I thought it's both are same or similar.
Okay, to give a context of that, ISAC stands for Information Sharing Analysis Center. It's a global term, and every country has their own ISAC. For example, US has its ISAC. Okay, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, they have their ISACs. EU has its own ISAC, right? So India has its ISAC, and this is what we are. Every country has their own ISAC. And ISAC, under our own foundation, we have subdivisions of ISAC, which caters to specific sectors. For example, we have an aviation ISAC, which works with the largest airport managers in the country, with GMR Group. We have an MOU under which we work, the ISAC Foundation for the aviation sector. So in that, what we do is that we try to protect all the airports in the country from cyber terrorism and cyber attacks. And there's a whole lot of initiatives that go in understanding that even the driver, the ground fleet which goes in the airport, are they trained in cybersecurity or not? All these measures are taken care by the foundation subsection, which is focused on sector. So the H ISAC which you saw is focused on healthcare. So there are more than 15 such sectors in the India which are designated CIS sectors, and not designated officially, but identified sectors, and the power sector is one of them. It's a designated sector by the Government of India under NCIPC. So we are the parent umbrella body for the ISACs in India. That's what we are.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for explaining.
Yeah. I'm quite aware about it. I am from the banking sector. I worked in bank for nearly 30 years. So I am aware of the ISAC of the banks, but I have not heard about yours. That's quite surprising. You are in existence for 10 years and even there is not much of awareness among the cybersecurity people themselves. So we are actually happy to have you here and share all this information.
Yes.
And second point is that regarding your becoming the member of your this thing, what exactly is your relationship, or how do you collaborate with CERT-In and other government organizations like NCIAPC and all that?
So we have an MOU with
particularly them. We are interested about knowing about your collaboration with CERT-In, because CERT-In is the umbrella organization for all the cybersecurity related issues.
Okay, so CERT-In, we have an MOU with them, which basically outlines our roles and activities in them. So we have certain activities that we do with CERT-In. For example, one of the MOU requirements under CERT-In is that we organize Defend the Flag event for them regularly every year. So we have to conduct, around 10 to 12 events for them. That is one of the mandates that CERT has given ISAC Foundation to do it. The training programs which happen for CERT-In is something that ISAC conducts for them. One of the activities that we do under CERT-In's mandate is called the Breach Point Program. This is basically about finding vulnerabilities and submitting it to CERT-In so that they can issue disclosure notifications to those companies and notify them to secure their assets. So the tech part of it, where execution of scanning of the networks, identifying vulnerabilities, giving a report to CERT-In, all this. So CERT partners with foundations like ours, which will enable CERT to discharge their mandate. So that is how we are collaborated with CERT-In. So we have an official MOU which has been approved by the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology under the ministry. It's like a signed document that we both organizations sign together, and then it is executed that way. That is how it is done.
Okay. How many in the NSD program? You've talked about various levels of accreditation.
Yes.
How many volunteers are there at present?
So the thing is that under the whole of NSD, we have over 4,000 members who are part of various categories under NSD program. And just for the intervention, we have crossed, separately just for intervention, it started, about 2 years back. Under that category, we have crossed 1,000 people who have been approved under the NSD program across India so far. It's very less. Our goal is to have at least 10,000 people by the end of 2025. It's again a very small number, but as of now, that's our mandate internally, to at least have 10,000 professionals who are able to solve. So it's ideally about top 10 metro cities. We want at least 1,000 volunteers available at any point of time in a state who can work with the police stations over there to help victims over there. That's the goal that we have.
It's because the examination is very tough, or the volunteers are not interested to do that?
No, it's not about exam being tough. The intent is that, did you understand the intervention aspects or not? There's a disturbance. I would request if those who are not speaking, they can mute for the time being.
Yeah, please. So, can I'll just mute all, and maybe that works.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because I'm saying the subject is very informative and it is very good. There are huge peoples are available, but the size what you mentioned is very small. That's why I asked. If the exam is tough, yes, there isn't a chance. If there are more people that's why I'm asked. You are
Raj, I just muted also. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay.
He is also muted.
So what happens is that, it's a very fairly new program, and volunteering is not everybody's cup of tea. Now, for example, a bulk of people that we speak to, they are like, I'm doing a job, I'm happy in my life. Why do I have to spend a few thousand rupees and learn something? I'm doing volunteering. Shouldn't he be paying me the money for that? There are people who will ask that kind of questions. There are some people who will say, why should I spend my time in doing something like this? It's a mixed bag, I mean, when you start, like I've been running a foundation for the last 10 years, and I understand the problem. Like someone, kindness and generosity, it doesn't come very normally, to everybody that we encounter with every day. There are people who are fantastically generous. They do support in a big way, but it takes a lot of time for people to understand what they're doing. A lot of people have questions like, can I get a job after I do this program? So the answer is no. This is not for giving you a job, but this is a program that teaches you how to find problems and how to fix it before it becomes too big for you to handle, or your family to handle it. And that is something that a lot of people don't understand very fast. So it's a learning curve is involved. So I hope that that answers your question in some way, that why are there not many people out there right now who are part of this program. It is growing rapidly, and one of the forums that like today we are speaking to about 200 people. So something like these, frequently I believe we will have to do more, so that a lot more people are aware of this program and they actually start contributing it. So typically a CCIO will save at least 2 or 3 people from committing suicide in a year's time. That is an average that we have noticed. They'll prevent at least a few families from losing lakhs of rupees in frauds. So we have rescued thousands of children who have been kidnapped in the streets using volunteers. But it all depends on those handful of people who come forward to volunteer for the society. So I hope in today's audience, at least 10% of them will come forward and try to become part of the program and and make a small difference.
So just
sir, good evening.
One more clarification I would like to ask. This is you gave some graded membership like volunteer, then Lancer, etc. Is it step by step we have to go, or we can directly register to a certain level based on our experience? How does that work? We are not there. If you can throw some light on that, that would help.
So the thing is that in NSD, the levels work like this. If you have presented in a cybersecurity research paper in any conference like Nullcon, Black Hat, DEF CON, then you are directly empaneled under cadet or Falcon category. You don't have to appear for an exam, first point. Second point, for the intervention officer course, also the exam which I'm talking about for the level, there is no exam fees for it. If you fail the exam, you can give one more time, you can give second time, you can give 3 times, you can give 100 times. There is no re-exam fees for it. So the intent is, you should pass the exam, not because for anybody, but for your own self. You just have to be honest with yourself that you have passed the exam, without copying. And that's why there is no fees to it. There is no renewal cost to it. You just appear the exam as many times as you want till you perfect and you understand all the ways to deal with the victims. You're good to go, right? Again, to become a Lancer, for example, if you have worked on any sensitive operation, let's say that you want to help the country against Chinese hackers or Pakistan hackers, if you work with an agency along with NSD to do something very interesting, which will help the country in doing preventing something big, then you are awarded a Lancer. So there is no cost to all these levels. These are awarded by the NSD project to those people depending on your contribution to the country at various stages in life. So there is no lateral movement. Also, you can become a scholar directly based on experience. You can become a Falcon based on your contribution. You can become a Lancer based on the wonderful job that you do for the country, or you can become an intervention officer based on the time that you spend as a volunteer to help people. So it's that way.
So you can be a scholar as well as a volunteer, or
absolutely
you
yes.
can also, yeah. And then the second point is that there was some mention about some fees being paid, 5,900 or something. What was that for?
That is the exam fees, not exam fees, there's a training fees that the foundation charges. Is again part of the Ministry of Education initiative. So there is a training cost involved for the people who will come and teach, which is what the cost is. As a non-profit foundation, you cannot have 0 rupees and then, have people spend a week training people. So this is a fee that is charged, again determined by the Government of India, which has been put up. And this fees which you pay, 25% of it goes to underprivileged children, and the rest of it goes to support the foundation activities in helping victims in cybercrime.
This training is there is a fee, but for exam there is no fee. If I get it right,
yes, right? You're right.
Then this training is online, is it, or it is?
It's completely online, and you have to spend 2 hours on Friday, 2 hours on Saturday for 3 weeks, and then you are taught everything about how to deal with victims. What are the psychological aspects? How do you spot problems? What kind of games that children play can be dangerous? How do you rate? How do you identify drug issues? Everything is taught to you. And once you are trained on this, then you are ready to appear for the assessment, which you can do as many times as you want. And after you clear the assessment exam, then you're good to go. You're part of the NSD project. You're officially issued the ID card and you become part of the database.
Is there any prerequisite for this program?
Sorry?
Is there any prerequisite for this program? Like you have to have this much years of experience or?
No, for intervention officer, you need to be at least 18 years of age. That's the only prerequisite.
Got it. Sure.
Yeah.
Sir, I have a fundamental question. Sorry
Please
to bombard with too many questions. Yeah,
please
initially you told, there were 358, organizations registers themselves as, providing malicious activities and all. I'm just curious, how a person can claim themselves to have an objective of, performing malicious activity and still get his or her organization registered in, I'm just curious to know.
So, to give you an example, since you asked, this what I'm going to share right now may be a little beyond some of people's understanding, but I'll still try to answer it in a very lay language for you to make you understand. One example I want to ask you is that to make you understand is that if you want to carry out a malicious activity, will you need funds or not?
Absolutely, yeah.
Can the fund come to your personal name, or will you need a bank account for that?
Yeah, we need, but obviously it has to come through some, unscrupulous channels and all. Yeah, definitely we need fund and we need an account. Yeah,
you need an account, you need a system to do that. And then if you're an individual who is carrying it out, the individuals are again, who drive these things. They will not, do it on their name, right? They will create a front for it so that they cannot be caught for it. Yes or no?
Yeah, pseudo accounts, so to say. Yeah,
pseudo accounts or pseudo organizations. So they create a corporate company, they create a firm, they register, they have a bank account, they have a registration in the government of India, they register like that, and then they accept funds in that, and they promote what their agenda is online, they recruit people, they pay salaries to them, everything is done officially. And if they don't do it in India with the bank account, they have a bank account somewhere outside, but they register because, people, to give an example to what kind of benefits you get, if you're a hacker or a cybersecurity expert, the average pay that you will get to work for them is around 3 lakhs per month. If you work for 2 years with them, you will get a flat, a 2 BHK or a 3 BHK of your choice in any city that you want in India as a gift for servicing for 2 years, for them. That is a deal that they offer on Facebook for young people who are in cybersecurity. So is that a good offer or not?
Sir, yeah, please don't make this sound so lucrative.
Yeah, of course. No, our IPSACA members are very professional. I mean, they will not fall for such materialistic aspects and all. But still, yeah.
But a lot of people don't know that. Those who are recruited, they have to go to Kashmir and they don't come back after 2 years. That a lot of people don't know that. So offers are there, but what's behind the offer, nobody knows. So you may be blackmailed. You can be beaten black and blue. Your family can be held hostage too. That's how. I mean, that's a complex web of how it all works. And I'll be more than happy to share with you how these things work, since we deal with it very closely with the agencies to handle such kind of issues. I mean, today morning we had a session on the Scholars program. The lectures are going on for the Scholars series right now. And today the topic was cyber warfare for 3 hours. So we had the Air Force, Navy, Army, all the agencies part of the lecture. So it's a complete whole world, how it works.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification, sir. Thank you.
Okay,
this is Raj. Couple of questions. Okay, one is that
check your coordinates so that we can contact you in case we need some information.
Sure. I'm just dropping this on the chat box, and my email.
This one is starting to sound more like that Tamil movie where Kaundamani and Senthil talk about going on a ship, and then he says, who will pay my salary? The ship company will pay. But who will collect it? I will collect it. In a similar manner, you're asking us to go to Kashmir, and who is going to enjoy the apartment?
Precisely what it is. And I can keep on sharing stories with you on this area, but it's a very dangerous situation. In Facebook, we have radicalized people especially from Kerala and all. They join these groups. Mumbai, they have joined groups. Ghaziabad, Noida, every place is affected. So, if you heard the story called Pied Piper, anybody? Do you remember the story of Pied Piper?
Yeah.
Back Pied Piper.
So the Pied Piper story, is it a real thing or a myth? What do you think?
It's a reality, and particularly when it comes to radicalizing people and putting them into this thing. It's a reality. We are seeing it happening in many places in Kerala, Karnataka also.
So Pied Piper in today's modern world is a YouTube channel where they upload their videos for radicalization, and the young children in the schools and college, they see the videos and they say, oh, this is what the truth is. I have to join them and help the country, and they join these radical groups. So the Pied Piper is in your house on your mobile phone. They are brainwashing young children about things which are absolutely not true, and then they are joining these groups.
So on a serious note, does India have any laws against radicalization, to prevent radicalization? Is there anything at all?
We have a lot of laws, but the point here is that before you file a complaint, you need a victim who can go and file a complaint. So the point is that if you join a group, who is going to complain? You're the one who's doing it, right? So laws are there. I mean, if they catch you doing this, you are in for a big time. But the point here is that these things happen online in cyberspace, and the intent is to prevent it. Our interest is not to put people in jail, right? That's what the intent is, that they should get good jobs in life. They should work for the country in a positive manner, not a negative manner. They should have a good life, and as long as they're in this world. That's the whole intent, and which requires us to counsel them, help them out in their life. But if they choose to not do the same thing, then what can anybody do?
Raj, a quick question.
Yeah.
So anywhere you guys connected with the NASSCOM and the National Skills Database, Skills Registry?
So NASSCOM Skill Registry is a voluntary program where you can register your skills in the program. Yes, I'm aware of that. We are partners with NASSCOM. In fact, the penetration testing program is recognized by NASSCOM Future Skills, certified by NASSCOM Future Skills also in the foundation. But it's very different. In NASSCOM, it's voluntary. Here, you have to prove it by an exam, a lab exam, a hands-on lab exam in cybersecurity. So if you are able to do that, only then you become part of it. There's a very big difference between both of them.
I think for when an organization wanted to empanel as part of CERT-In, there is definitely a mechanism to evaluate and then certify as well, right? So you're talking about more or less the similar thing, not as an organization, as an individual, right? So are we as a country, we are running multiple parallel databases like this as one. And the flip side of it, I'm also wanted to understand, since there is a very structured program of training people at various levels and then getting it, or this focus is given to the cops, that getting them trained rather than blaming them?
So we are not blaming the cops at all. We actually empathize with them and we want them to get trained in it. But the question here that you need to understand, but what you need to understand is that how the structure of the government is. Those cops who learn cybersecurity and they become experts in forensics, or they become very good in pen testing, 3 years after they serve in cybercrime cell, they are transferred to the traffic department. So they are standing on the roads, managing signals and vehicles on the road, but they're cyber experts. So this is inevitable truth. So you can be transferred at any point of time, and there is no guarantee that you'll be in the same department of IT. So just because you are a cop and you learn cybersecurity does not mean that you'll be able to use it in your life, in professional life. You are lucky that you can choose, I want to work in X company with my skills. You're lucky as a professional to choose that, but they cannot choose it. That's something that you should understand. So
exactly the root of the problem we want to really solve together, right? Now, since you guys have public-private partnership and you have reached to the Prime Minister level, why not this can be fixed at the root rather than really making boiling the ocean, that getting the people in, and one side skills registry is being built, the other side we are building examination and then training, and then people, there is no assured service on this, right? The moment you call it as voluntary, then there is no commitment, right? So if there is no commitment, then you can't expect the quality of work, right? So are we really trying to solve the problem from the root, or we want to really make go the process go as it is, and then somebody like NASCOM or ISAC, tomorrow another foundation may be coming in, then wanted to solve the specific problems, and we'll never mature. I'm just not to be very, very, direct on that. Sorry about it if it is.
No, not at all. I would love to answer that, in fact. So one of the questions that I want to ask you is that you are a cybersecurity professional yourself, is it?
Yes, of course.
My question to you is that if you were asked beyond your office hours to spend 1 hour in teaching cybersecurity to, let's say, a bunch of kids, basics of cybersecurity, would your service be mediocre or would it be excellent based on your experience, or would you intentionally degrade the quality of your time of 1 hour that you spend with them because you're not getting paid for that? What would you do?
No, it's not something intentionally people will reduce the quality of it. See, when it is coming to the corporate level, there is something called CSR, right? Corporate social responsibility. Yeah. And the corporate social responsibility can go into environment, can go into technology, can go into anything else. Okay, whatever be the way you want to contribute back to the society, right? So there is a mandate, and there is an accountability. There is a commitment.
Correct.
Right? So when the cops are really being committed, CERT-In as an organization is committed, NASCOM as an organization committed. Right, there are a lot of government and quasi-government bodies which are committed to do that.
Correct.
So those people can be targeted first for doing this, and then this can be an add-on to that rather than flipping around it. That's
so I can answer you in this way. The thing is that you need to understand the magnitude of the problem also. The total manpower of the police, if you see in a state, how many police stations does Chennai have? How many cybercrime cells do they have, and how many people are there?
That's true, Raj. The point is that is this voluntary program without the commitment, is it going to really solve the problem in a long run? That's the question.
So the answer is yes. And how it's going to solve the problem, I'll tell you that. What we expect from people by doing this voluntary program is that they become self-aware and they protect their family members immediately from this problem. If you are self-aware and you understand, the problems of the cyber crimes that can impact you and your family or your daughter or children, that is itself, solid. It's like a vaccination. You take it. Doesn't mean that you will not be impacted by COVID, but then it's a protection. That's the same way. It's like a vaccination shot. You take that training program. You are aware enough to protect yourself from crimes. That is one case less in the police station, one problem less, one victim less. And if you spend as a volunteer 2 hours, 3 hours in a month in teaching to 200 people, 300 people, that is that number of people less. The problem is the time that you have to give. CSR money, I wish money could solve the problem. You can give $1 billion as a grant, but it will not solve the problem because it's like this. If you want to bond with children, you cannot give them mobile devices and expect them to bond with you. You need to spend quality time with them. There's exactly the same problem here also. You need people who will give time, which is what it's a voluntary service. And money is not going to solve the problem here. So even CSR is not going to fix it. So we need people like you, me, everybody else on the ground to spend an hour to talk to children, talk to teenagers, talk to old people, and tell them what the problem is, and then hope that they understand it good enough so that one fine day they implement it. I'll give a small example to you just to extend what I'm trying to tell you. In the program, there is a case study that we conduct. We show, for example, if a girl is studying in her home and a boy sends a message to the girl saying that, "Hey, what are you doing? I want to meet you at 5 o'clock in the evening today." The girl says, "I'm studying." Then the boy replies, "If you don't come to meet me at 5 o'clock at Cafe Coffee Day, I'm going to cut my wrist and I'm going to die. You'll be responsible for it." Now the girl does not know what to do. She's panicked. She, 12-year-old, 13, 15-year-old girl, she will panic. She'll say, "Please don't commit such things. Please don't kill yourself. Please don't cut your hands or fingers. Don't do this." But the boy is blackmailing us, saying that if you don't do this, I'm going to do this. You better come right now, else I'm going to jump off the building. Have you experienced something like this happening? Have you seen someone doing like this? Now, what we teach the girls in that training program is that, as a volunteer, what you will teach the girls is that never go and meet such people. If they want to die, let them die. But tell your parents and teachers about this problem and don't keep it to yourself. Don't delete the evidence. Most girls will delete the messages. They'll think, "I'm deleting the message, the problem is solved." But we teach them why this is important, that you retain the evidence so that the police will believe that what you're saying is true. After 3 years, after you do a lecture like this, when the girl is in college and a boy talks to her like this, she will recognize a pattern. I was taught 3 years back that someone talks to me like this, I should first preserve the evidence on my phone. I should talk to my mother and father. I should not hide it from them. I should talk to my mother. I should tell my teachers, and I should take the required action for it. That is what we are looking at. The seed that you plant for education today, this will impact the lives of people 3 years down the line, because they will realize what you've taught them 3 years down the line. So that is what we're looking at from this program. Now, immediate results, we don't know that, but we have seen a lot of people being benefited from this program. So I certainly feel that it's going to help.
So, okay, I totally got the intention. Probably we can take an offline discussion, Raj. The point what I'm trying to make is the why CSR program is effective because of it is a mandate, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm looking at. Since you guys are capable enough to really influence the government decisions, can some of this be a mandate, right?
It is already happening in some ways. Now, if you're aware, the MHA has recently released a cyber volunteering program under the Ministry of Home Affairs in cybercrime.gov.in, right? This started after this initiative started for CCI volunteers across India. Now to officially, ask people to give, information on the child sexual abuse materials, CSAM materials, to the police directly. So there is a mandate which has gone to the government. There are reforms which are happening. There are things happening, but it's not going to happen overnight, right? And there's a lot of work to do for next 5 years. 10 years. So you need to go hand in hand with awareness and reforms. That's the whole point here.
Got it. I'm not against volunteerism. Anyways, it's a good cause. Then I just wanted to really make something black and white, and then looking at the road, how we can really work together.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with what Mr. Manikam says. The thing is, like, maybe you can make, think of making it mandatory for government officials, at least for so many hours in their career, in a month or in a year, that they need to play the role of a volunteer. So
actually,
something like that.
If you make it mandatory, nobody will like it. So volunteering is an option which you should enjoy doing it on your own, which is why there is no mandatory thing. But
no, I agree with you. But then volunteering, then you may not get that much response unless you need to balance between the two, making it mandatory and at the same time inviting more and more volunteers.
We hope that happens.
Problem is very heavy, and we require more people.
Yes, you're right, absolutely right. But we hope we are able to do a bit in whatever possible. Mandatory, I don't know. I am worried that the days mandatory, some more scams around it will pop up automatically. That pay this much and I'll give you a certificate that you've done your job, and the mandatory thing is done. I don't know. But anyways, it's a good thought, and we hope it happens.
Raj, actually, like the CP, you can discuss with certain, like Visakha, you can set up with them. Those who are coming there and doing the service, you can avail 1 hour CP or 2 hour CP.
That'll be fantastic. I think we are open to that idea. It's a fantastic idea.
Because this is because most of the people, the CP is mandatory, and it is a cost. They are supporting the government also.
Yes.
So that will give a very beautiful yield over it. This is my point of view.
We will be happy if you can facilitate such a kind of a discussion with the with your foundation, and if something like this can be arranged, we'll be more than happy to enter into a collaboration.
Raj.
Yes.
Sorry.
This is something which I would like to ask. There's both the sides. Our friend was saying that there is police persons has to be deployed, and you also talked about the cyber warfare activity which is done for the armed forces. At one point in time, I was there in the cyber warfare cell as well. Okay, so I understand both of your sides. Okay, so
I'm glad.
I would be happy to connect offline on these lines. Okay, so but the thing is what both of your expressions, and I respect both of them, and it's both very correctly true. Okay, there is not even an inch here or there. I can say that.
Yes.
But I'll tell the person who is voicing his opinion that you have to speak it to the Prime Minister's office. So the moment it comes to Prime Minister's office or wherever it is, me being myself over there, okay, sitting in the North Block, okay, I couldn't make even a dot to move the bureaucratism. Okay,
Tell me
a lot of bureaucratism around it. Okay.
Yes. And it's very different.
And I'm sorry, I'm very open over here, but a lot of bureaucratism around it. And if you want to break in, and somewhere we will end up in failing. Okay. So So the thing is that is PPP is one of the fantastic way to make a representation. Okay, and whatever you are telling, person will be sitting in. You are talking just a very smallest point of people sitting in as a traffic police. Okay.
Yes.
I can say that they will be posted to Kargil. They will be posted to the borders. Okay,
Yes.
where you will just see kilometers length of pairs of wires or sands, and
Yes.
you will forget all your cyber skills over there.
Exactly.
So
that's how it happens in real life.
So that's how it works, because you've been sincere to that. So bureaucratism works, kicks in over there. So there is somehow that what you call as tagging that personalities. Okay, personalities who have been very clear in doing it, and without getting moving around some personal attention to that or association to it, these people should be done. All your psychometrics test and all goes for a toss when somebody attaches a personal intention and personal reference to that. Okay, so then all these things goes for it. And another thing is that is when you all say that I look for the skill, I look for that, I look for this thing. Okay, all the CTFs are done, and there are a lot of scientists sitting over there. I'll not speak for myself. I'll speak for a lot of scientists who are sitting over there, and they have been asked to go stand in the queue for railway reservations.
Yes, that's unfortunate. Truth.
Unfortunate it is. Okay, so that is where you end up in losing all these skills which has been learned. Okay,
which is why we also say the same thing, that we will not wait for the government to pass a directive or a resolution to act. We will not wait for the government to do something. It's our families, it's our people, it's our friends and families. We would rather take it on our own hands and take care of them than wait for a policy or a mandate from the government to happen in such a, at least the fact is that they are endorsing this. They are actually supporting this through PPP partnerships. They are saying, you know what, hey, we understand the problem. Why don't you just do this? We are lending our name to this. I think that is good enough what they've done. The rest is up to us, like people like you and me, to do it now.
So PPP is a simple. If it is done, in a very meticulous manner, the answers are there, like Passport Seva. Okay, AIMS has been done. AIMS today you can get a reservation or you can block your dates online. Gone are those days where you have to wait for years to be there. Okay, that is one PPP. There are umpteen number of PPPs we can define it. But if it is done in a very nice manner, everybody knows in this country that how Passport Seva is being done now.
Truly, yes.
So, so PPP is certainly good, and please, it is my kind request. Please do not end up in asking a basic education qualification.
It's not there, right? It's only the age which is required. You don't need to have any qualification for this.
Because the thing is that is when you have a CEH or you have an what do you call CISSP, you have all these things. You prove your skills. But unfortunately, the one statement will come from the government organizations: you should be a BE guy. Then only you can apply for the job. Hence, you will not get people over there, and people end up in joining these private companies.
Yes. Well, luckily for us, in our case, at least it's not that way. We are absolutely free to decide the parameters for it, and it's just the age.
So what happens is that you end up in people losing the people, those who are really interested, because I visit colleges and I teach them, those who are just UGs are like that. They want to join the cyber organization, but just because the government is asking BE, they will not be able to join. Fantastic people I've seen. So these are the couple of areas probably I just wanted to add upon to another gentleman who was telling that why don't you look at all these things? These are other things. Educational qualification, if you look at, if your person is able to prove skills, then why are you asking for BE or ME, MTech? Doesn't make any sense. We have seen a person who is sitting with ME, nothing against a person who is holding the degrees. Okay. But you have seen people, they are not able to prove. Their skills are there in some other areas. But the skills has to be proved in this area to work in this area. So two different things. So that is another important area we will have to see on this, and brought it up to the nations require. This is another thing which I just wanted to add upon to other gentlemen who were just added. So said fantastic points he has brought up. Why are we trying to boil the ocean? Why can't we leverage them? So this is another thing. Okay, I just wanted to add this.
No problem. Good insight.
Raj, on behalf of ISACA Chennai chapter, I really thank for your time here. And what we can do is a favor. I mean, you have seen the interactions from our chapter people yourself, right? And it's a vibrant chapter, as I told you yesterday. So the participation always will be there, and we thank the members also for that. And what we can do is definitely, yes, as everyone says, it's a very informative session, and we need to have that awareness being created, which is very foundational today, right? So what we can do is we will kind of try and get this session. I mean, it's already recorded, and we'll get this session in YouTube, and also pass this feedback to our other chapters in India, which is we have chapters in Bangalore, New Delhi, Mumbai. So obviously, if they wish, they would definitely contact you in terms of having a similar session. That's the kind of first things that we can do. And we'll see from a long-term perspective, like how we can kind of partner with you in terms of, obviously we are all there for the good cause, and even ISACA for that matter, we are also doing good awareness session. Because personally, if you ask me, I've done in schools. Jamuna has done, she just mentioned it. So, from ISACA chapter also, we do a lot of, programs. But the thing is, the efforts from your side is like quite phenomenal in terms of you have a proper team to kind of proper platform to have these enabled. So I think that's really appreciated, and that's a bit we can do for you, Raj, today.
That'll be great, actually. Thank you so much for that kind words, and all of you are welcome to be part of this initiative and contribute in your own small ways. So thank you again for this opportunity.